thank you for being here. Thank you, Zoom people, wherever you are. But it's nice to have some in-persons too. My in-person part was a little bit last minute, so thank you for also being in person. I appreciate it. So the new novel is called How to Read a Book, and in it you follow three characters, and one character is Violet Powell. She's 22 years old, and she is just finishing up a prison sentence for a drunk driving accident in which she killed a kindergarten teacher. And the other character, and she's been dumped in Portland, Maine, abandoned by her family. She is completely, totally alone in the world. And the next character you meet is Harriet Larson, who is a retired English teacher, and she is about to face an empty nest. And to fill her time and kind of give her life structure and purpose, she is volunteering as the book club leader at the prison where Violet is serving her time, and that's where they meet. And then there's a third character named Frank Daigle, who is a retired machinist, and he is working as an extremely overqualified handyman, and he's also retired, in a bookstore that is very closely based on Longfellow books in Portland. I call it Wadsworth books in the book. And so the three of them meet by chance one day in the bookstore. And Frank, I should add, is the widower of the woman that Violet killed. So the three of them meet. He is working there. Harriet's there to get her next batch of books for the book club. And Violet, who has just been released, can't think of anything to do except go to the nearest bookstore and find the book that they were reading when she was released so she can find out how it ended. So the three of them meet because of this, and this chance encounter then forms the fuel for the plot that you go through in the book. Their lives begin to entwine in, I think, very interesting ways. And it's really about how the human animal, we are pack animals, and we need a pack, even if it's a pack of two. And if we don't have that, we have ways of finding it somewhere. And I write a lot about found family, making family units out of various parts, broken parts, spare parts, wounded parts. And this is what all three of the characters in this book are doing in some fashion. And it's also a story about the art of forgiveness, especially the art of forgiving the unforgivable, and especially the art of forgiving the unforgivable in oneself. It's far easier to extend the grace of forgiveness to another human being, even a stranger, than it is to apply that same grace to ourselves. It's just part of the human condition, I think. And this is what Violet is obviously wrestling with, because she's done an absolutely terrible thing. But the other characters in the book, people you might not suspect at first, are also wrestling with those same kinds of things. So this is my forgiveness book. And I mean, I've written about that theme before, but it's pretty much front and center in this one. And I should add too that, I didn't start out saying, I think I'll write a novel about forgiveness. That's not what happens. Theme does not come first. Theme bubbles up from the story that you start writing. And a lot of times you don't even understand what your themes are until readers tell you what they are. They say, I really noticed that just the other day, somebody said, did you do this on purpose? But there's something about, I'm writing about, part of Violet has been an inmate, and a lot of the scenes in the book take place in the book club in the prison. And there's also some birds that figure into this, some caged birds that figure into the story. And she said, were you talking like incarceration about, cages and, and I thought, yeah, but I didn't realize it. And it's just so interesting because it's all there, but you don't think, I anyway, I don't intellectualize the process. I'm just in the story, I'm with the characters I'm writing, and I'm writing to find out what happens next, same as you when you're reading, especially that first draft when I have no idea where it's going. So it was just it's kind of interesting that I learn a lot from my readers after the fact, which is a very interesting and fun thing in a writer's life. I'm going to read to you a chapter from the first chapter of the book, a condensed version of the chapter, just to give you an idea of how I write, if you're not familiar with my work. But before I do that, I would like to just say, this book came in a very different way from this is my 6th novel. And mostly what happens is I start with a character who has some kind of trouble in their life, a problem to solve, or, some kind of trouble. That stories don't start until the first sign of trouble. And then I just kind of follow whatever happens after that. And it's a really strange process to try to explain, because so much of it is just kind of magical and subconscious. There's a lot of craft involved, which is, head work, but so much of it is also just, it's so hard to explain, but things just sort of come and you don't even exactly know where they came from. I mean, I understand they all came from my head, but it doesn't feel that way when it's happening. And so this one came to me, and normally when I do this, so I have a character with a problem, and then I'll write about 50 pages or sometimes much more to figure out who the character is, what the problem really is, and how that problem reveals something about that character and other characters who come into it on the journey. And then I throw all of those pages away and start over with what I think of as the real page 1. And sometimes you have to write 100 pages to get to the real page 1, because if you think about it, what do you really know on page 10 about a character you've just made up 10 pages ago? And a problem that you just made up 10 pages ago? You don't know very much. And it takes a while to get to know a fictional character, just like it takes a while to know a real person. How do they act under pressure? Who are their friends? How do they treat people? How do they talk? Things like that. And it takes sometimes, a lot of pages to figure those things out. So that's what my normal process is. And because that's my process, it's kind of horrifyingly painstaking, and it takes a long time. So I normally spend about 4 years on a novel. That is I've tried to do it shorter, and every single one, 4 years, just no matter what I try. So this one, though, was different in so many ways. And the first thing that was different is that this book came to me in the way people who don't write novels sometimes think novels come to novelists, which is a bolt from the blue in the middle of the night. That is exactly where this novel came from. So it was in the summer of 2019. It was late August. It was really hot. I was having trouble sleeping, and I was just waking up night after night, about 3 a.m. And after a while, I realized I'd been awoken by this voice that was I knew it was some narrative voice that was asking to be in a book somewhere. And at the time, I was writing plays and really enjoying it. I love playwriting. It's so much fun. There's a lot of teamwork and camaraderie, exactly the opposite of writing a novel, which is no teamwork, no camaraderie. Nobody cares if it's going well. Nobody stops to say, how's it going? Unless your husband happens by, or the cat. I actually had one cat. We had a string of cats, and I've had only one that would listen to an entire manuscript and not fall asleep. That was Alex. He was a great cat. He just listened the whole thing. It was so cute. And cats are not usually that polite. So anyway, I'm listening to this voice, and I remember saying to this monologuist, whoever she was, I said, I am a playwright now. Go find somebody else. And the next night, I woke up, same thing, that voice. So I thought, well, maybe if I just get this out of my system, I'll write down what she's saying, put it in a drawer, maybe I can use it sometime later. So I did. I went downstairs, I sat on my bottom step. In the front, I could see it so clearly. The screen door is opened, because it was just the screen door, because it was a hot night, and there's a street light. I live in Portland. There's a street light there, and I had enough light to see by. And I wrote down what became a version of what became this first chapter that I'm going to read to you. And it's in Violet's voice. She speaks in the first person. The other characters come in the third person. And there is a narrative reason for that it doesn't become clear until pretty late in the game. So I wrote that down, went upstairs, put it in a drawer. I thought, well, that's that. Out of my system. This is great. Next night, another voice is talking to me, and it's Harriet, the book club leader, book lady. And I thought, oh, for heaven's sake. So I did the same thing. I thought, I'll just write that down, see what happens. It was less coherent, and her name was Shirley, not Harriet. I hardly ever change characters' names, but I did change Shirley to Harriet at some point. And I just wrote it down, put it away, and that was it. I kind of got it out of my system, and it felt like, okay, well, I'm going on with whatever else I was doing. And about 2 months later, I suddenly was insanely curious about what connected these two people. And I started writing the book. That's why I started writing the book. So it was a very, very different process. And the other thing that was different about the process is, instead of that painstaking, write all these pages, throw them away, write some more, throw them away, I thought, partly because, it was COVID, for one thing. This was during the pandemic. And I think we were all a little more aware of mortality during the pandemic. And I'm thinking, time's a wasting. I better start writing faster. So I was really thinking about that. And I said, well, maybe for once in my life, I can write the way a lot of my writer friends write, is they just kind of stumble through a first draft. They start at the beginning, go to the end, try to figure out what the story is, and just bump along until they have a big, gushy, terrible, but complete first draft. So I did. I started writing, and I thought I did do a lot of revising on the way, but I tried to really resist the temptation to start over again. I did not do that, and I just went to the end, and in 1 year I had a first draft, which is half the time that I would normally take. It wasn't good. The structure was all over the place. I didn't quite understand all the characters, but there were really good parts. But the big thing is I knew more or less what the story was. And that's the hardest thing to get down, is plot, for me, the hardest thing. The characters are, partly because the characters guide the plot. I don't start with a plot. In fact, I don't know how people do that. I was just talking with Peg earlier about how some things are, the plot is in front and the characters are kind of just following the plot. And so the characters don't feel as real because they have to make that right turn in order for the plot to be right. And I do it the opposite way, which is why it takes so much longer, because you want the character to take a right turn and they take a left turn. And then you have a whole other problem to deal with. So that's, the writing process is painstaking in that way. But I did it. I wrote a draft of this book in 1 year. And then the next year, and it was still pandemic time, I spent every day working on this book and doing all the stuff that I enjoy about writing, which is honing the language, getting the characters right, writing, new dialogue, figuring out what the real structure of the story is. And this one is kind of unusual. You think it's a traditional structure, but it actually isn't. And that was the fun part. And that also took 1 year, which was, again, amazing. So it was a really interesting thing how this was this was born very differently from my other books. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But anyway, so for now, I would like to read you the first chapter. And if you get the book, people have it, which is lovely. If you get the book, I advise you to start over again from page 1, because I'm leaving a few things out just for the reading purposes. So this is Violet, chapter 1. The visitor's room is exactly the functional, state-designed space you'd expect. A bland, boring rectangle, solid wall at each end, and a bank of windows along both sides. One bank of windows opens to the outs, a skeleton of barbed wire where goldfinches sometimes light, and beyond that, a bumpy, sloping field, tufts of this and thickets of that, whose colors change all year long. On this day I'm thinking of, I am 22 years old, on short time that still feels long, and the field is snow-covered, bluish, with dead stalks sticking out here and there like cries for help. The walls are naked except for a poster that shows you what to do in case of choking. No furniture except for a table and 13 armless, ass-pinching chairs. What color there is runs from putty to Band-Aid, but when we're all here, the room feels warmish, lived in. The other bank of windows runs along the main corridor, and across that corridor, another bank of windows looks into the chow hall, not a wall in the place without a window in it. Doors too, Everything here is designed to murder your privacy. I can still see us so clearly. 12 women dressed in our blues, and the book lady at the head of the table, sensible button-up blouse patterned with smiley green bees, helping us discuss a book we hate. I feel the way I always feel in book club, the way I believe we all feel, safe. The book is called Scar Tissue, a so-called true story about a famous cardiac surgeon who grew up eating dirt, actual literal dirt from a junky front yard in East Texas. Dirt sprinkled on her Cheerios, punishment for reading the newspaper. Donna Lynn goes first, as usual. She swipes her stringy hair behind her ears. What do we care about a rich lady doctor whose biggest tragedy is winter in New York City? It's snow, lady, says Renee. Get over yourself. Like most of us, Renee and Donna Lynn grew up in Maine and take great exception to a famous cardiac surgeon's whining about 2 inches of slush as she pushes a double stroller across 5th fucking Avenue. Kitten says, nobody eats dirt for 16 years and gets to be a famous cardiac surgeon. Then Shayna, nobody eats dirt for 16 years and gets adorable twins with matching dimples. Then Jacinta, I wouldn't walk across the street to spit on her. And Marielle, no way her low-life parents were secretly educated and talented. And Jenny Big, you can't hide talent. Automatically, we look at Donna Lynn. At my first town meeting, she belted all the comic songs from her high school's long-ago production of Guys and Dolls, and even the COs broke up laughing. Dorothy, who has 6 kids and bladder prolapse, literally peed her pants. I was new and scared, and the show made me laugh so hard I suddenly believed I could stand the next 28 months without dying of despair. It was also sad, though, because Donna Lynn, whose nickname is Showtime, has a Broadway voice that should have given her a different life. A choice here, a choice there. She could be posing in a ball gown with her Tony Award instead of hamming it up at town meeting in her blues. I understand your point, the book lady says. She always understands our point because she's a retired English teacher who enjoys lively discussion. Plus, she likes us. However, she adds, which she always does, in order for reading to become an exercise in empathy, it helps to think of all the characters in all the books as fellow creatures. Even the ones we don't understand, says Britty, who's got the pointy face and eye circles of a tame raccoon. Jenny Big adds on cue, even the ones we don't like. Desiree finishes up, even the ones we hate with the fiery shitballs of hell. The book lady, who is older lady pretty with a sweet peachy face and soft jowls, opens her hands. There you go, it's not that hard. In the year and a half since we've been coming to book club, the book lady has tried out all kinds of authors, from Virginia Woolf to Zadie Smith, and we've complained about them all. We love complaining. It's weirdly empowering. The book lady hasn't figured this out yet. Not that we don't have preferences. Our favorite stretch started last fall when we asked for the classics most of us had read in high school and remembered from before. To Kill a Mockingbird, Of Mice and Men, The Great Gatsby. Those books felt like family. Those books took us through the worst of winter, a heartless one, too much snow, too many days without yard time. Ethan Frome was the last of the batch, and this time around, I read it with different eyes. Beautiful Maddie turns into a querulous hag after a sledding accident with Ethan. It's basically about how life sucks and nobody who deserves love ever gets it. The author should have called it Ethan Frome, God Hates Your Guts, Donna Lynn said at the time. So the book lady, of course, asked us what we thought about God, a question that lasted us through the remainder of that session. Every Friday, 2 hours, books, books, books. We get to keep them after we're done, and that's no small thing, a stack of triumphs under the bed. Today, we're at the end of that dismal winter, discussing a flashback to where the famous cardiac surgeon first meets her gorgeous financial manager husband in the elevator of their apartment building. We already know this guy whose obnoxiousness through 27 chapters goes right over the author's head, but she's circling back to their first meeting to show us that life has a shape, but you don't see that shape until later. Good point, I'll give her that. Then Shayna pipes up out of the blue. that one time her boyfriend threw her clothes out the window of their second floor apartment because she wouldn't give him a blowjob before she left for work. This is book club, this out of the blueness, because reading books, even annoying books about lucky people who think they grew up tragically, gets us talking. My boyfriend did that, Desiree says. Third floor, my clothes plus my purse plus my elephant figurines, everything smashed on the street. Jacinta goes next. Fourth floor, my clothes, my purse, my mom's jewelry. Me too, says Renee. Fifth floor, plus my cat. Renee is short and dark and pretty, and I really, really hate that her cat got tossed. But this happens a lot, a game called Who Got It Worst, and most of it's true. Then Amy, little Amy, who looks about 12, a shivering little field mouse. She says, my husband threw my baby. He threw my baby out the window. I didn't really care about the clothes. Usually by the time somebody gets sent up, even if the reason is of the sort that makes the news, it's months or more since the coverage, so we either don't remember or don't care. But when the reason is throwing a baby into the street, it sticks. So sometimes we know. Either way, we don't talk about our reasons. We talk about before, what we ate, where we lived, who we loved and hated, never about our reason, even if everybody knows what it is. They know mine. As for Amy, her reason was actually the husband's reason. He's the one who did the baby throwing. A jury of her so-called peers did not believe this. Imagine the courtroom. Husband, a good-looking civil engineer. Wife, Amy, a pitifully young mother with depression so bad her lawyers can't get her to comb her hair. Which is how she lands on the inside, crying for her baby at book club, and he winds up on the outs, managing a bridge project. The book lady has gone super quiet. We call her Bookie, Bookie the book lady. On her first day, she introduced herself as Harriet. First name only, of course, millions of rules. But within a month, we knew her last name, Larson, and the name of her street, Belmont, and the make of her car, Toyota Corolla Marine Blue. Her house is a Queen Anne with deep windowsills loved by Tabsy, the book lady's black and white, overweight, indoor-only, prone to vomiting cat. We're not supposed to know these things, but the book lady, for all her methodical handouts and typed lesson plans, treats us like a bunch of girls just talking. Everybody quits us sooner or later, mostly sooner. And if I were the book lady, the last thing I would do is come here once a week to hang out with ingrates who complain about my reading choices. Of the 15 books she's brought in by now, not one has met with unanimous approval. In the stillness of the book lady's gaze, I'm glad to have read those 15 books. The library here, oh my God, nothing but romance and double agents. I can't say I loved The Great Gatsby, but sometimes a sparkling sentence can really rip you up. So we drove on toward death through the cooling twilight. A sentence like that can put you someplace other than the shithole where you happen to be reading it. Or it's an ambush that puts you exactly in the shithole where you happen to be reading it. The book lady contemplates her hands. Maybe she's considering a kindly, diplomatic way to say she's just about had it. But no, instead she takes off her reading glasses and says, not once, not in my entire 64 years has a man thrown my things out a window. You can almost hear the room relax like a let-go balloon. You're lucky, Bookie, says Jacinta. That's right, Jacinta, I am lucky. Not everybody's lucky, Kitten says. Kitten, I married a man who loved me. That would be Lou, says Renee. They know everything. Yes, Renee, dear Lou. He died, though, says Marielle. Marielle, a Milhan's kid, beefy and tender. Well, yes, Marielle, but we had a good run. Shayna says, when your niece leaves for California, all you'll have left is Tabsy. Oh, but Shayna, Tabsy makes for a wonderful husband, the book lady says. And then we're all laughing because we've sort of fallen for Tabsy ourselves. And the book lady's clearly not leaving us. Then we're back on track talking about luck and books and life and why the scar tissue author's flawless twins don't deserve a $40,000 per kid preschool. Oh, darn, the book lady says. She frowns at the wall clock like its sole purpose is to ruin fun. Quitting time already. This moment always catches me unaware. The door opens and real life thunders in. A howl from Four Walk, the iron echo of a CO coming in one door or going out another. Wait, before we go, I have a surprise, the book lady says, which always means a new book. She slumps her satchel on the table and removes the stack. It was written in the 40s, but you'll find it feels quite contemporary. People call it a novel, but in fact, it's two novellas. A little murmur of approval. Novella sounds kind of swanky, or at least short. It's about a brother and sister at a crossroad in their lives, separate but related crossroads. The sister is experiencing either a crisis of faith or a nervous breakdown. Won't it be fun to discuss which it is? She passes out copies of the book, Franny and Zooey by J.D. Salinger. A burst of energy zings around the room because some of us already know this author. I pick up my copy and hold it. I like the weight of a book, any book, in my hand. This one's pretty, small and slim, plain white cover with stocky black letters. I read Catcher in the Rye in 8th grade, I tell the book lady. Catcher in the Rye is for innocence, the book lady says, as Roberts, the ugliest CO in the place, looms outside the door because God forbid we get 2 extra seconds of book club. This one's for people with some life behind them. We like the sound of that. We are women with some life behind us. We know some things. The feeling lasts till I get out to the corridor, and then there I am. I should say, there we are. And by we, I include not only the other women, but the souls who came here with us, invisible but present, like hovering ghosts. Some of them are alive, somewhere on the outs, greatly altered, maybe forever, by something we did. And some of them are dead, also because of something we did. On certain days, the quieter days when nobody gets written up or lugged or dragged to the fishbowl, the days when the place feels not like a dementia unit on Mars, but like an animal shelter filled with calm dogs, I can almost see them, our reasons, small, smoky thicknesses in the air, like guardian angels in a way, guarding our memory of them. They float among us, quiet and uncomplaining, and they refuse to disappear. Come dark in the quiet of your cot, you can taste them like ash after fire. We don't talk about this, but we know. We know this about each other. Our reasons meet us in the morning and whisper to us at night. Mine is an innocent, unsuspecting, eternally 61-year-old woman named Lorraine Daigle. She is part of me now, a sliver of bone knitted to one of my bones. At night, locked down, prayers said, I murmur, night, Briddy, and Briddy whispers, night, Violet. After that, in the blessed privacy of my own head, I think whisper, night, Lorraine. Every night I think whisper this. At the age of 22, I do not yet know how many more days God will give me, but I know this. I will think whisper, night, Lorraine, at the end of every single one. So that is Violet. Thank you. And that's the voice that came to me in the night. It's funny, somebody, I think it was you, Peg, who was saying that you did read the book and that you missed the characters. And normally when I finish a book, it's 4 years later. I've been 4 years with these people, and it's plenty of time. And I'm just like, don't let the door hit you on the way out. But in this one, it's really funny because I've been reading this chapter, and this is probably my 16th book event since May. And I'm not tired of it. I like reconnecting with my characters because I do miss them because I didn't spend enough time with them to not miss them. If I had spent 4 years with them, they would have been driving me crazy for 4 years, and I'd be so happy that they were finally done and in a book and beyond my reach. And in this one, it's not like I think I want to do more with them, but I do miss them because it was a shorter acquaintanceship that we had. So the other thing that was a little different about this book, it's the first book I've ever written with the help of a writing group. I've never had a writing group before. And I had no idea how much I wanted one and needed one. And again, as I said, I had been writing plays, and I really loved, a lot of playwriting, you do write the play, the actual script alone, but very soon into the process, you have to just put scenes out there and have people reading them. It's the only way to know if a play is going to work, because it's not meant to be read, it's meant to be seen and heard. So, you start inviting people in very early in the process, which is not true with a novel. You invite people in at the last possible second, and the readers, you don't invite them in at all until it's out and you hope they will read it. So this one was, I thought, having a writing group it was so interesting. It's 8 years now, and there's 5 of us, and we're 5 very well-published novelists, very serious writers, and we're all really dear friends, especially now. And we're all one of 5 kids, and it's somehow the family dynamics in this are hilarious. And we're all a little bit different in the birth order, so we've sort of kind of put ourselves as a family of 5 siblings, and it's the bossy one and the sweet one and I won't even say which one I am. I'm the oldest though. So they're marvelous. And I just want to say, especially for the Zoomies out there, that coincidentally, we all have books out this year, which was not planned, but we read thousands of pages for each other. We weighed in with each other. We helped make each person's book better. In fact, the book is dedicated to my writing group. So the first one to come out was Kate Christensen. It's a book called Welcome Home, Stranger, and it's about a climate journalist who comes back to Maine. She lives in DC and comes back to Maine after her harridan of a mother finally dies. And it's a family dynamic story that's really interesting. That's called Welcome Home, Stranger. And then the next one to come out was Bad Animals by Sarah Bronstein. It's her second novel. It's really interesting. And the main character is a librarian, and it takes place largely in a library, which is very cool. I haven't seen that as a setting very often. You would think it would be, but it's really not a setting for novels. And then the next one to come out was How to Read a Book. And then last week, my mate, Bill Rohrback's book came out, and that is called Beep. And it's a slim little book that is very hard to describe. It's a little bit apocalyptic, but it's narrated by a squirrel monkey named Beep. And it's charming and profound and beautiful. And then the last one to come out is Lewis Robinson, and that is called The Islanders. It's coming out in September. And that one is about a group of high school screw-ups. These kids screwed up something big time in their lives. There's one from every state, and they've been recruited by these 1%er CEO types, one by one, to come to this island off the coast of Maine. And it's almost like a boot camp, but they don't yet understand what they're being recruited for. And they find out eventually what this is all about. It's suspenseful, and the kids are so endearing, and you'll love it. So you'll love all these books. But anyway, there we are, 5 new books in one season, which is kind of amazing. I thought it was pretty cool. And then the other thing that happened with this book, it was all ready to go. It took very little editing really after I was done, which is kind of amazing for a 2-year book. I mean, I sent it to my agent, and she always sends 4 pages, single-spaced, of suggestions, which are always good. She's actually a fantastic editor, but she is an agent instead. But she reads fast and deep, and she's really smart. And she also talks faster than any person I've ever met in my entire life. But she's fantastic. We've been together now for, 30 years, I think. Yeah, her name's Gail. And she loved it, but she had all kinds of suggestions for that final rewrite, which I love, because by the time my manuscripts get to the editor, they're very done, so that way the editor and I can kind of confer on something that's not very broken, so you can really kind of punch things up or whatever without a lot of drama, which some people have. One of the things about having a writing group is great is we sometimes call emergency Zoom meetings if somebody's like having a fight with their editor or their agent or something. It's so nice to have we've all been through all of it many, many times. So that's another great thing about having a group. So anyway, there was a very weird thing because my last book, The 1 in a Million Boy, and the one before that, When We Were the Kennedys, were edited by a woman named Deanne Ermey, who I absolutely adore. And it was with Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, a wonderful publisher, the oldest publisher in the country. And just before, like 2 seconds before I sent this manuscript in, Houghton Mifflin was sold to HarperCollins. So I had a new publisher, everything was new. Some of the team came over, some of them didn't. And Deanne told me that she really wanted to do my next book, to edit my next book. But she's about my age and, kind of wasn't sure if she was going to retire, she was already kind of doing she had cut back already quite a bit. She's like maybe 68 or 9, something like that. And it was, you think about, in editing, people stay a little later than normal, but you kind of think about it at that age. And in publishing these days, it's really, really important to have the same team, including your editor, especially your editor, in place from the beginning right through publication, right through really paperback publication, because there's a lot of books being sold. Every editor has books they want to champion. And because there are so many books now and publishing has gotten so much bigger, it's harder. It's not like the old days when an editor would get a manuscript, fall in love with it, and say, I want to publish this book, and lo, it would happen. That is not like that anymore. You have these launch meetings, which means the editor brings a manuscript to a committee that includes, everybody from the person who answers the phone to the person handling sales and marketing. It's this big meeting, and what they do is they try to convince the in-house people that they can take a chance on this particular book, whatever it is. So Deanne was an old hand at that, and I had complete faith in her that way. But she said, I think for the sake of this book, not knowing where I'm going to be in a year, which is what it takes, it turned out to be 2 years, but that's a whole other story about a strike and all kinds of stuff. But anyway, she said, but I'm going to hand you off to somebody I think you will really like. She's an excellent editor. I've worked with her now for 2 or 3 years. I kind of took her under my wing, and she's 25 years old. And I thought, wow, that is young. That's young. And I was worried that we wouldn't speak the same language. I immediately Googled her, and it turns out she had just finished her master's in fine arts at Emerson. She's a really young woman. She's now an old lady of 29, I think. But she turned out to be an absolutely wonderful editor for me and for this book. And Jessica does what already, I think she's an old soul. She asks really wise questions. She's wise. She's a wise young woman. And she does what a good editor does, is they don't try to bend the book to their own will and try to get you to write the book they would have written with the same material. And they also are careful not to let the book go too much to the author's will. So it can be something like, I took a cruise to Capri in 1995, and I really think maybe this character should take a cruise to Capri because I can remember, and it doesn't help the story at all. So there's things like that, like keeping writers from their own self-indulgence. And instead, she tries to bend the book to its own will, to make the book be the best book it wants to be, not what I want it to be or what she wants it to be. And there's really something in that, and it resonated with me a lot, because I do think of books almost as living things that have their own intentions that sometimes don't match my intentions, and that a book just kind of exists somewhere fully formed. And I just have to figure out, hope I have the chops to do it justice and to make it be what it is out there in my mind or in the ether or wherever art comes from. I don't even know, which sounds a little woo-woo, I know, but process is very hard to talk about. But I do feel like books have their own, they're almost like animals or something. It's hard to describe. So the only other thing I want to say before I open it up to questions, is anybody who's read me before knows that I really like putting characters to work at real jobs. So they don't work like in an architecture office that you never see and you never hear anything about the architecture. I like seeing characters at work because you can tell a lot about people, about how they feel about their job, how they do their job, how they relate to their colleagues, that kind of thing. So for this one, I had 3 jobs. I had Harriet, who's retired, but she's doing this book club in prison. And, I'm also an older woman who loves books, so that wasn't a big stretch. But then I had Frank, who is a retired machinist. And even though my father-in-law was a machinist and my husband worked with him as a young man in the shop, I didn't really have enough of a real feeling for it to feel like I had the authority to slip into Frank's skin and think like a machinist and view the world like somebody who's done machine work for 44 years. It's just not my world. So I asked my husband, who teaches at SMCC, that's Dan right there. These Zoom people can't see him, but he's very cute. I asked, Dan works at SMCC in the Architectural and Engineering Design Technology Department, and he hooked me up with the precision machine tool guys over in the next building. And so for a semester, I once a week went to class with the 12, 19-year-old boys who were also taking machine tool. And it was such an interesting and wonderful experience. First of all, the students were so kind to me and so almost protective, like they wanted to make sure I had a good experience and that I was learning what I should learn. One of them was from my hometown, Cameron, like 6'6", a big football player. And we bonded over the milling machine. And it was a really good experience, but I realized that I didn't really need to know how to mill something, which I did learn. I learned how to run the milling machine and the lathe and a lot of the cutting things and how to measure things, which is not my thing. It was all stuff I'm bad at, which is good for an aging brain. I highly recommend it. Go to a machine class. It'll change your life. But really what I needed to know was more the sensory stuff. Like standing at a milling machine for 4 hours at a time is very hard on the body. Your back starts to hurt, your feet hurt, your fingers hurt, and these little chips of metal come flying off the machine and they kind of pick, they burn your skin a little bit, things like that I never would have known or even thought of that I could put in there. So that was really exciting for me to get that more sensory feeling about it. And then the other job is something I had to have Violet. She needed a job. She's a felon, she's out, and it's going to be very hard for her to find a job. So Harriet ends up hooking her up with the university, which is a job that her niece, who's leaving for California, had. And she convinces the niece to put in a word for Violet. And so Violet ends up in this job that I've been waiting decades to put in a book. And the job is working as a lab assistant for a behavioral research scientist studying avian cognition in African gray parrots, which is a real thing. It's an actual thing. And since the 70s, I've been very interested in the work of this woman named Dr. Irene Pepperberg. Some people might remember Alex the parrot. Oh, Peg, I knew you would know that. Yes, Alex the parrot. He was a world famous African gray parrot because she was doing studies with this bird and it was just amazing the things he could do. He could label, they call it labeling, as if you know the right word for the right thing, like 150 objects. He could tell you quantities of things, colors of things, shapes of things, materials of things. So, and now she has, 30 years later, she has 2 parrots now that she's working with, Athena and Griffin. And Griffin is right here. I don't know if the Zoom people can see this, but I met him. It was like meeting Mick Jagger, I swear to God. And there he is, isn't he cute? He actually bit me, but that's another story. So that was Griffin, and Griffin is in his mid-20s, which is kind of primo for a parrot. That's when they're kind of hitting their peak as far as what they can learn. And Athena was only 8 when I met her, so she's still kind of a baby. She's kind of a little party girl. She doesn't really want to work. Her focus isn't the greatest, but she still knows how to do a lot of stuff. But Griffin, I went to Harvard. I did not go to Harvard. I visited Harvard because that's where her lab was at the time. This was in December, just before the pandemic, actually, just before Christmas 2019. And I asked her several times if I could visit, that I was working on this book, that I'd followed her research, that I loved Alex. I cried when he died. And she just was kind of reluctant. And she said, the last time a writer came in this lab, I ended up as the murderer in their book. And I said, well, I don't write murder books, for one thing, and there's no villains, or, everybody's more than one thing. And I said, and the behavioral research scientist in my book is a Russian male, so no one's gonna think it's you. So finally she said, okay, you can come. So it was a snowy day. I took the Downeaster down to Boston. I took the T over to Cambridge, and I'm walking across the campus. It's so, Harvard, it's snowing, it was very Dead Poets Society, it was really cool. I think this is the kind of research I can get behind. It's not like sticking your nose in a book about World War I. I'm gonna go meet a parrot. So I get to the lab and I walk in the door, and the two of them are sitting on a perch, and Athena, this is in the book actually, she lifts her foot like this and sort of moves it like she's waving to me. And it just meant she wanted to get on me, which, I just about melted into my shoes. They were so sweet. And then there was a lab tech there, a student tech there, who kind of put Griffin through his paces. And it's just fascinating. You can go on YouTube and see this. You can put a tray of objects and you say, how many red? And let's say there's a red key, a red wool ball, and a red square. He'll say 3. Actually, he'll say 3. And if you say, how many wool? And he'll look, and there's like a felt square, and there's a pom-pom, which is wool, and something else, he'll say 4. It's really astonishing. And just to illustrate how smart this bird is, this must have been a publicity thing. I'm not quite sure how this happened. It seems out of character for her, but it was wonderful. So she invited a few Harvard freshmen, these smarty pants, come over to the lab and go head to head with Griffin in that boardwalk game where you hide something under a cup and then switch and then find it and then switch and find it. Except this time it's pom-poms, which these birds love pom-poms. So there's four pom-poms of different colors. And so you cover them with cups, and you say, this like white, green, yellow, blue. And you say, Griffin, where is blue? And he'll peck the blue cup. And then you switch them and you say, Griffin, where is yellow? And he'll peck the yellow cup. So he's not following just one thing, he's following 4 different things. And when he did this one-on-one with the Harvard students, he kicked their asses, which is pretty amazing. So he can do it, I think, up to 5 switches, which is really astonishing. I'm not sure I could get past 2. And the theory is that in the wild, they have large clutches, and so they have to keep track of who's been fed and who hasn't. And so maybe that's why they're so good at this particular skill, but they're crazy good at it. So that was really fun. I love doing research like that. And again, some of it was the sensory stuff, like what a parrot feels like sitting on your shoulder, which is like heaven. What they sound like, they have these scratchy little voices. Just even how warm they are, I had no idea. They tend to lean, like if they're sitting on you, they tend to lean on you, and their temperature is 108 or 9. And that's warm. It was a winter day, and he's like having a little, muff or something on. So those are the things that I needed to know and learned by visiting the parrots. So that's just a little bit about the book and the process of writing it. And if anybody, Zoom people or live people, have a question, I'd be very happy to answer any of them.
I wanted to ask about the research that you did with the prison setting and the experience of having to be searched and, I've never been to a prison, but I really felt like I had after I read your book.
Oh, thank you.
It was just really resonated. So I
Yeah.
wondered how you got to that point.
Well, I ended up, the first time I visited the Wyndham Correctional Center, the women's unit. The women's unit at the Wyndham Correctional Center, if you're a woman in Maine with a sentence of 14 months or more, that is where you go. So there's women who are there for, habitual drunk driving or, relatively minor drug offenses, that's 14 months. And then there are some who are there for 25 years, a couple are there with life sentences. It's a very, very eclectic mix of women. Some are highly educated, some barely made it through high school, if that. So it's a really interesting group of people. What I found, how I got there was the Maine Humanities Council had done just a kind of a one and done book club there, and they used my book Ernie's Ark, which is an older book of mine, with these women. And the person who was running the group found out that I lived in Portland and found me on the internet and said, would you be willing to come in and visit one of these sessions? And I said, I would love to, that would be great. So I did go, and it's weird going in a prison. I mean, it's so noisy, everything clanks. It's just so, I mean, if you have any kind of sensory stuff, it's a very, it's really hard to describe. And there's just one gate after another and one steel door after another. And you wait, you're waiting for some unseen God to unlock the door, and then you can go in. And sometimes you wait 2 seconds, and sometimes you wait 5 minutes. It's an unpredictable, unlovely place. But the women's unit, I mean, if I had to serve time and I could choose where, that's where I would choose. It's old now, but it was considered progressive at the time. It has a lot of light. It has a big day room that would remind you of like a women's dorm. They're not behind bars, they're behind doors, so it's not like a cell exactly. It's not, in fact, the biggest compliment they gave me one day is they said, we think you would do really well in prison. And I said, I think I would. I think I would do, I think I would do very well in prison. I mean, I hope I never have to test that theory, but I do. And anyway, so the first time I went with this discussion of Ernie's Ark, and I just fell in love with these women. They were so smart and insightful, and it honestly was probably the best discussion I've ever had about that book with a group of people. It was really something. And I came home and I said to Dan, I really want to go back there and do something. I felt instantly at home. I cannot explain it. I felt like I belong here. So I asked the Humanities Council if they would give me $1,000 so that I could buy hardcover books to do a program that would last 12 weeks called Meet the Authors. I just made it up. And the idea was all the books would be by Maine women authors, and they were all friends of mine. And so what we would do is we would read the book for a couple of weeks and discuss it, and it was really fun. And then I would invite the author of the book, because they were friends, so they came in for one session the same way I did at the beginning, and the women would discuss the book with them, and then the author would give the women a writing assignment based on the genre that they'd been reading. So poetry, personal essay, children's literature. One of them was, Hannah came to every single group I did, I think, and she writes, or did write, kind of lay science books. Like one of them that was a big hit is called The Well-Dressed Ape, A Field Guide to Myself. And she's a witty writer, and it's looking at Homo sapiens, like the human animal, as if it were a bear or a dog or a bird or just any field guide to an animal. And it's enlightening and also kind of funny, but really interesting and real science, and they loved that. So it just worked out really well. So I did that about 9 years ago over a period of 3 years. And it was a very gratifying experience. I've never felt more appreciated by anyone, because incarcerated people are dying for any kind of intellectual stimulation. And the biggest thing that you can bring, I felt like the biggest thing I brought was just showing up when I said I would. Just all you have to do is show up, honestly. It almost doesn't matter what you're bringing, as long as you come when you say you're gonna come. And you will feel very appreciated. It's really important work. And I also feel, in case any of you are so inclined, anybody out there or in here are so inclined, you know, these people, most of them are getting out, either a month from now or 10 years from now or sometime. And why not have them leave with something, you know, something they wrote, something they, you know, just a different feeling about themselves and what they might be capable of. I think it's really important and all for the public good. So thank you for that question. Appreciate it. Anybody else? We're almost at our time.
I don't have a question, but I am a practicing English teacher, not
Oh,
retired.
thank you for your
but-
service.
Thank you. And when I was in 10th grade, I read Ethan Frome,
Oh.
and I loved it so much.
Yeah.
It was so romantic,
Oh, it's so
and I just
dark,
loved
yes.
it. And so this last year, I decided to teach it. And I didn't reread it. I just,
Oh,
I
boy.
loved it. And I was like, wow, this is terrible.
It's horrifying.
I can't believe my kids are reading this.
Isn't
It's
that-
so
oh, that is
bad.
so great.
So I recognized that in
Yeah.
your description there.
Thank you for that. I know it is funny to reread things. I reread Wuthering Heights a few years ago. That is a horrifying book. He hangs the puppies. This, you know, romantic hero, he's a psychopath. And I don't know, when you're young, you don't see these things. He's just handsome, so okay. It's just crazy. Oh, one more thing. This is, and I'll wrap this up. One of the most wonderful things we did in the prison program was I persuaded one of my groups to do like a public reading for the population. And so every Wednesday, they have what's called town meeting. So it's at 2:00, and it begins with some kind of affirmation. And then somebody stands up to say things like, you know, we really appreciated the ice cream social, or we something. And then it's a list of grievances, like we're out of tampons again, or can you please separate the men's and the women's sheets, because men are disgusting pigs. Stuff like that. It gets kind of rough at times. And then once in a while, there's some like special, somebody has an announcement or something. I went when I was first doing my program to explain what it was, and if anybody really loves to read and wants to write. So I did that. So I persuaded 5 of them to do a reading for the population of things they had written in our group. And it was a couple of poems, and a short essay and something else I can't remember. And I was really worried about it because I wasn't exactly sure what the reaction would be. And especially for this one, which was a wonderful essay, and it came after reading Hannah's book about the human animal. And it was a short essay set in the, and they rarely write about prison, they write about other things. But this was set in the prison, but it was written in a, that old show, Wild Kingdom. So with the, like you could almost hear like the whispering, and now the animals are going to the watering hole. And it was a day in prison as if they were animals on the savannah. And it was hilarious. But, you know, the word animals in prison is not, I was just like, oh God, I hope this goes well. So she begins to read, and the place just was busting laughing. It's such a great thing. But the greatest thing about it was, so the COs are around and they're just looking for trouble, you know, and then all of a sudden I noticed they're looking over at her and they're chuckling and they're seeing her as a writer. I mean, it was really, I still feel chills kind of thinking about it. It was a wonderful moment that she could just be somewhere other than there where they were. You know, it was really quite amazing. So, and you're amazing. Thank you all so much for being here, and it was great.
Thank you, Monica. This was fantastic. Thank you.